Welcome to Just Ecology. So today I'm going to present an interview I held with good friend Vicky Shukuroglou. She's an incredible artist, author, environmental activist, educator, among many other things. And we sat down together at a reserve in Eltham, to the northeast of Melbourne. We discussed some of her more recent work. We discussed the book that she's put together with Bruce Pascoe. And we talked about the importance of getting kids out in nature, how to stay positive in the environmental movement, among many other things. So I hope you enjoy this interview. So I was wondering if you want to start by telling us a bit about the country we're on today. Not only this bushland reserve, but this broader Yarra Nillumbio region. I'd love to hear more about your connection to this place and, in whatever way that kind of means to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tal. So we are in Hones Hill Reserve, which is one of Nillumbic's very beautiful and precious reserves, partly because of the threatened species that it holds, but also because it is part of a really big, broader habitat corridor. It is a bit fragmented currently. It's quite near the confluence of the Diamond Creek and Birrarung, which is a really important place and undervalued in many ways, culturally and environmentally. And so that's just sort of over there, and the Birrarung Yarra runs right along here, which is one of the most important habitat corridors and gives context, I guess, much more broadly. And the Diamond Creek, what a precious waterway. Undervalued as well. Has platypus, has all kinds of wonderful qualities, but is full of weeds, full of rubbish. We did a big cleanup a couple of times recently, and the amount of stuff that comes out, plastic. So there's a lot of pressure around this area. It's on that sort of urban fringe. It's also really wonderfully close to high use areas like sports fields and playgrounds and things. So there's that sense of people being close to it but not really intimate with it. And here we've got the Friends group going for the last year or so, and we've been super busy attending to the weed cover, getting rid of heaps of Cassinia sifton, and trying to make things better for the Eltham copper butterflies, for the glycine, for everything around. And my motivation really is about how we can enable people to connect, because there are a lot of people who care and feel it in their hearts, but aren't quite sure how to make change or enable good outcomes. And it's just an incredibly beautiful approach that people come together and make wonderful things happen. And so I've lived in the area for a long time and know it intimately, just through being in the bush and going slow and observing and having that connection with the animals, which grows the more attention you give. And it's a magical thing. And you and I have walked here plenty of times through all different parts, and it's astonishing what the earth can offer when you give it your attention, and that's what motivates me.
And I really relate to that. You're saying with this whole Nillumbio area where you can be somewhere and just feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, and there's incredible biodiversity around you, but at the same time there can be a 4-lane, 5-lane road just there, and there's a lot of pressure too, isn't there? So I'm going to get to that in terms of talking about what you've been up to in terms of managing and trying to address those pressures, because it's so important in this kind of peri-urban environment. So I'd love to focus more on your more recent kind of advocacy work and restoration, ecological restoration. But you've also written this incredible book just a few years ago, Loving Country, with Bruce Pascoe. And you shared with me before about this incredible journey you went on around Australia, in very remote parts, visiting different Aboriginal communities. I heard how, you're often alone, and a lot of it was during the COVID pandemic time, so it was pretty crazy, incredible journey. So before we get on to more recent times, I'd just love to hear a bit about the book and about your journey around Australia, if you like sharing.
Yeah, sure. It was a work of love in every possible way. Just about not a day went by where I thought, I must be crazy.
Maybe we are.
Maybe we are, and that's great. But yeah, it was a huge undertaking of giving attention and listening and building relationships. And so the book came about through conversation and a real refinement of ethos. And I was very, I guess, strident in what I was willing and not willing to do, and the quality that I was going to maintain. And that was a really interesting process, because it's a sort of a refinement and an affirmation of what is important, because it really required every ounce of capacity that I had in terms of, day-to-day maintenance of the vehicle, because I was on the road by myself, sleeping in the car. So the car, my dad helped me sort of convert it into a sleeping space and workspace and everything. It's like a house car, which is great, but hard. Yeah. And, just maintaining everything, maintaining the laptop, which actually melted.
In the heat.
In the heat. Yep.
Literally melted.
Literally melted. I opened it and there was all this weird liquid. Yeah. And, melted. Yeah. Which is unsurprising. Yeah. And, just keeping the cameras going and dust-free, and the humidity and the intense heat and the intense cold. Yeah. And my skin would sort of dry out completely and then be hyper-moisturized. And that basic day-to-day stuff, and doing everything on your own. Everything. So decision-making, making sure you're sort of safe at night. Yeah. Finding a good place to sleep, keeping cool enough, keeping hydrated enough, all that stuff. And then being present and strong in meeting people, and with complete open-heartedness. And my intention is always very clear. And I think the older fellas and ladies, they see it very clearly, which is great. Yeah. And they're incredibly welcoming and beautiful. So those relationships establish over time, and the consistent response was of appreciation and people just really wanting to be heard, genuinely heard. Yeah, wow. And so carrying all that story and holding it, and holding that space of listening, and going out bush to different places, whether it's the pressures being felt from mining, from overgrazing, from all kinds of different pressures that are ever present. Yes. Yeah. And how those old people are trying to attend to it in the context of modern, what they call progress, is a real emotional challenge. And how to apply that knowledge from the old people to today, and to carry that forward, and that sense of what it means to be on country, in care, is the message they just really desperately want people to hear. And so it was, a real privilege, honour, to be able to sit with them and hold that space.
And so for those who haven't explored the book yet, that essentially you were going to lots of different communities around Australia, and you were really there to listen and learn their stories. And I know that there was incredible photographs in this book, so you did a lot of photography, and that was, so you essentially go to a new community and you'd have to, I suppose, start the relations as well, wouldn't you? Yeah. Kind of coming out of the blue, and they're kind of, some of those communities are used to people just kind of rocking up, and it's not always going well, but you had to rock up. And but my impression is you were, some of the knowledge in that book that they were willing to share was really incredible. And, Yeah, so...
Yeah, and, you know, that beautiful thing of also there's so much that's not in the book. And that was that process of how do we find what to include and what not to include, and that understanding of sacredness in different ways.
Yeah.
And, you know, it doesn't have to be a sacred site in order for something to be sacred. You know, in all kinds of ways, the whole country is sacred.
Yes.
And that is a key message, I think, to say, what are we honouring here?
Yeah.
And I think because I bring that with me, that was recognised by the elders, and so those relationships established really sweetly, I guess. And they would guide me to places to go and look at and photograph, and stories to emerge and things like that. And they would worry for me, and they'd say, you know, big storm's coming, you got to get out of here in 2 days, kind of thing. And so, you know, it was a very intimate and beautiful process.
Wow.
And so, you know, for me to honour that in the book was paramount.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's such an important point that, you know, I see that with biodiversity as well, where there's often, you know, if they're putting a freeway in somewhere and they're like, oh, this is a biodiversity hotspot, there's a threatened species here, or it might be there's a cultural site here, and it's like, oh, we'll go around that. It's like, we've got to get the message. It's all sacred. It's all, you know, it's all just as sacred in many ways. I'm not trying to talk for Aboriginal people here who have different, you know, forms of sacred, but at the same time, all land is, you know, it's not like just because this is a sacred site that should be protected and everything else
can be demolished.
It's demolished, you know. It's so such an important message.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of those really exciting things, because we can all see and observe and understand and build that relationship and intimacy, and see the sacredness
totally
in life, because that's enriching for us.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could do a whole interview just on the book and your journey there. But for those who haven't explored it, I highly recommend it. I'll put it up on the video here. But yeah, I'd love to move on to, I think it was not long after you got back from that incredible journey, which was about a year, I think, wasn't it?
I was away for a year and a half.
Yeah, you're away for a year, and you didn't come back and just go on a holiday or relax. You needed it. But I think it was not long after you set up Nillumbio. Co-founded Nillumbio, which is this really powerful advocacy group, which is standing up for this Nillumbik, which is out of northeast Melbourne kind of region. I'd love to hear more about, you know, what motivated you to set up the group and what the group gets up to, what are your achievements and that kind of thing.
So when I got back, one of the key things that was happening was this, what I call the Eltham Airport, which used to be a really lovely roundabout and is now a massive intersection. And that was...
On the way here, I nearly got kind of diverted into the city because I was in the wrong lane, and it was just, it's all a bit scary now. Yeah.
It is. And so through that process of engagement with the road construction company, all kinds of wonderful, interesting things happened. It was highly contentious. There was a lot of grief in the community. The process was not really, I guess, one of consultation. And so I developed a relationship with the construction company through that whole building and demolishment and everything else, and managed to get a whole lot of plants relocated, lilies, grasses, etc. And that was the first time that they'd done that. And so through that, all kinds of good things have happened. But that really indicated to me that there is a need for different processes and education and connection with community. And soon after that was maybe the Great Southern BioBlitz or something like that, where the emphasis is on competition of who can see more things. And I went, that sounds all fine and good, but my emphasis is very much on collaboration and finding out about what lives here and how do we enable that understanding and progress from that point. And so I put forward an idea to a group of people that we do something along those lines. So we do the Great Southern BioBlitz, but with a collaborative approach. And a couple of people thought that was a really good way to do it. And it was kind of from there that Nillumbio started, and with an emphasis on connecting with the community and saying, what lives here?
Yeah.
How can we learn about the tiniest things, whether it's soil bacteria or fungi or, ground covers or
Insects
giant trees,
yeah.
insects, marsupials, birds, everything.
Yeah.
And so from that point, we've kind of created this really beautiful life form in a way, which, is really inclusive. We invite people on walks. We've got 2 walks tomorrow and they book out within a day. 40 people keen to go out bush looking, learning, talking about fungi or eucalypts or whatever it might be. And we do forums and we encourage people to participate in different ways. And it's all about bringing our attention to biodiversity, its complexity, because I think one of the key messages really is it's easy to make assumptions about things, and it makes things faster, but the repercussions are huge if we don't look at complexity. And so it is really very much about saying, let us understand and make slow decisions, and let us look at things in their fullness and in their relationship. And how can we enable that for ourselves and for everybody else?
There's this famous quote, I won't get it right, but something like, for every complex problem there's a solution that's easy something and wrong. Easy, straightforward and wrong or something. It's like, there's just like, people often want the easy, simple fix, and it's like not exactly wanting to, it gets too complex, it's just they don't want to deal with it, but it's always, it's not straightforward. It's always, there's multiple answers, multiple things going in, kind of synergistic effects, and
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's in that complexity that I think all kinds of wonderful things emerge. And learning and aliveness. So it's how do we bring attention to that and foster it.
And it's like I've seen the amount of people you get on your walks is really inspiring. Like, there's hundreds of people have come through on your walks.
Hundreds. And it's so gorgeous because it just tells us that there is thirst. You know, people want to find ways to connect and learn. And so, how do we enable that to continue? And for people to be self-initiating. So it's exciting.
And I know you've also done a lot of work with Nillumbio, which is a huge amount of work, like on particular submissions coming up, and not always fun, but trying to get the community on board for providing templates so they can kind of give some feedback on important issues like biodiversity strategies and things like that. And I see you do hours and hours of work on these things with the help of others in the group, and it's
a massive undertaking in that way of applying a different form of knowledge in a way, and also trying to understand planning strategies and it's great learning.
All the fun stuff.
But it's hours at the computer, which is never great, but important, you know. And how can we, with our skills, enable people to make better submissions, to learn, to make change. Good things happen. And council needs to hear from the community. There's all kinds of surveys that really clearly say Nillumbik residents' top priorities are the environment. But I guess policy process requires that council does consult. And if we just tire and say we can't be bothered participating anymore, that sends a message of apathy. And so how do we keep that energy going when it's really kind of hard?
It is.
And people are feeling despondent and a lot of grief, and how can we enrich and transform in order to put that into a good output?
Totally. And I love it. It seems like it's just really almost like a mycelial network. You've got so much going on, and there's like little fruiting bodies popping up here and there.
And, that's lovely.
And one of those is Friends of Biodiversity, Hones Hill. I know we're at Hones Hill Reserve today, and I'm lucky enough to have been involved in survey and monitoring and helping a bit with the management of this reserve for well over 10 years. And I was really excited when you told me you were thinking of forming this group here with a few others, because it's one of those reserves that it really needed more attention and more love than council had resources to give it. So yeah, it's been really exciting for me to watch it. I was there at the inception when we helped launch it together with a bit of some different talks and walks and things, and then I've just been seeing these. I live a few hours away, so I don't make it to the events, but just seeing you posting, these really seems like a really active group. There's a lot of people turning up. You're getting some incredible different work done, but also it's quite holistic. You seem to be doing, not just the kind of, pulling out weeds, but also, which is important, but also the, kind of education and, kind of monitoring and those kind of things. So, I'd love to hear more about, how you set up Friends of Biodiversity and what the group is getting up to.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So one of the things, I guess, is in the name, Friends of Biodiversity Hones Hill. I didn't want it just to be site-specific. Yeah. So really the emphasis is that we're Friends of Biodiversity. Yeah. And so part of it is, again, that whole how do we enable people to participate and educate, share that learning and come together in a really soulful, beautiful way. And that's what people really love. We start at 10, we finish at 12 in terms of the work, and then people stay for an hour or two, chatting, having cups of tea, eating snacks. And it's that really beautiful connection that people relish, and learning together and going slowly together. So I have a very strong emphasis on, different ways of weeding. I am a very strong advocate of not using chemical spray, partly because we don't know enough about the impacts on the soil microbiome. Yeah. We don't know enough about the impacts on ants and other life forms. Yes. Yeah. And this is a reserve where we have to look after all of that, partly because of the Eltham copper butterfly. Yes. Yeah. But because we just have an obligation. Yeah. And so I say the slow work might feel slower, but it's actually more effective in the long term. Yes. Yeah. And it also enables closer observation when you're hand weeding. Yeah. And looking after patches, you see so much more than if you are just going around with a spray gun. Yeah. And so we've found all kinds of, we've found new patches of the glycine, we've found big patches of desmodium, we've found, Pimelia curviflora in areas where other people have deemed them as crap, basically. Yeah. And so I go, no, there's great things. Yeah. We just need to look. Yeah. And so, the weeding, I tell people we take one stem, run your hand down to the bottom and sort of wiggle it out. Don't grab big handfuls and soil and everything comes out and disturbance. Yeah. Because part of it, there's incredible quality of bush here, but also high weed load. Yes. And so most of the time when you disturb, the weeds will come up. Yeah. As we have seen on our way up. That's right. Yeah. And there's carpets of vetch. Yeah. But areas where we've been working slowly over time has decreased significantly. And, it's that reduction of the seed bank of the weed seed and the increase of the indigenous seed. And so we're sort of tipping that balance. Definitely. And Watsonia, would be sprayed on a regular basis. Yeah. And it still comes back because it's such a bugger. Yeah. But, first two working bees, we just hammered it and massive areas of what used to be Watsonia. Yeah. Watsonia now. Yeah. And it's fantastic. Yeah. And it's, people can see the difference and no off-target damage. There's, No, that's right. Yeah. And, you can focus on that. Up it comes, bag loads and bag loads and no off-target damage. Yeah. What a great thing. Yeah. The other thing, sorry, you go. And just the mountains of Cassinia sifton, this one here. That's right, our friend. Our friend. Yeah. Which, I have seen creatures using it. Last time we found a mantis egg case on one. Yeah. We found case moth one and, other things like that. And one time I snipped it and a little caterpillar was inside, just missed its head. Yeah. So, there is value in this, but because there is other diversity of flora here and it is highly invasive, we do try and get it out. So mountains and mountains of that. Yeah, and I often find these plants responding to our disturbances and our change of, caring for this country that, might have had a bit of Aboriginal burning for a long time and then would have a whole lot of different grazing animals and all these things we've done to change it. So then,
you get changes in the plants where
That's right.
something might become overly invasive because of how we've often kind of treated the bush. So it's not exactly it's obviously not the plant's fault, but sometimes we're having to thin these plants
that's right.
to try and get it back to so that all the species are actually surviving, because if it gets too dense because of this disturbance, then you start losing little plants and insects and everything. So
and it is that constant sort of monitoring of the implications. So once we remove things and the sun comes in, what does that mean in terms of moisture or all of this?
All of this.
Yeah. And we've also done the flora surveys, so set up 4 plots, 8 plots really, but we did the surveys in 4 of them and doing point quadrating something. Yes?
Point transects,
Point transects, which is so intense.
Yeah.
Wow. So 20 by 20 metres, every 2 metres we have a line, and every 20 centimetres there's a point, and Jeff calls out the name of the plant, so we write it down, and so we've got this data.
Yeah.
And so part of that's super complex and has a lot of data, but part of the great thing is that we've seen so carefully what is in each plot. Yeah. And in time, with different management, we can contemplate what is there and the effects. So
Yeah. I was also saying about the hand weeding as well. I think it's so important, like just that you get to get your hands dirty. Like a lot of people experience this when they're doing gardening. There's that act of getting your hands down there and rummaging around compared to if you were just spraying, where you don't have that connection. So I think that's really something that is really therapeutic and can be really enjoyable when you just kind of
and the textures, and just getting to, and that's what I tell people, just touch everything.
That's right.
Run your hands along the leaves, the roughness and the softness and the hairs and and that's how you get to know things. That's how you're I haven't gone to a botanical sort of course, I haven't done anything like that, but it's just through that on ground intimacy that you go, I know that plant and I know it really well. Beautiful. It is beautiful.
And so I know something we've talked at length about before, and I think it's really important, is the need to kind of stay positive when you're doing all this environmental advocacy. You're trying to stand up and protect nature. It's something I think the climate kind of campaign could improve sometimes, because often it's using fear to kind of scare people into doing the right thing, which you can see how that can be effective, but it also I can see it's backfired in. There's a lot of young people I know who feel very hopeless about the state of the world. There's a lot of apathy, and also just I know a lot of environmentalists who get very burnt out because they love the bush so much and they're seeing things getting crushed. And so I think it's, when you can stay positive, you can have more energy and you can have, kind of keep going in the long term. And it's good for your happiness, which is really, and it kind of helps to inspire others. But at the same time, you can't ignore that, we've all seen our local patch get, destroyed or some, things happening all the time. And it can be really hard to stay positive. So I'd just love to hear what you think about that in terms of the importance of staying kind of positive where you can, but how you kind of navigate that rocky terrain of living in a not always positive world, but still trying to...
It is so true. And it is one of the biggest challenges, but I think at the end of the day, I feel a deep responsibility or love that comes from the earth. And I'm going to stand and bear witness, and the best thing that I can possibly do is put love into it. And that comes from a really highly energized cycle, I guess, of feeding and receiving. And so how do we tap into that? That is, I think, through attending to these things and seeing the beauty and relishing in that energy that is ever present, and knowing that everything that we do can be of a good intention with fantastic outcomes. And that is up to us. We have that capacity. Every individual can say, I can do something great. And isn't that amazing?
Totally.
And I go, fantastic. And how many people live in the world? A lot. Perhaps too many. And so, it's all about how do we, that transformative process of energizing through love. Which kind of sounds, I don't know. It's a really simple thing in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we bring that forward and the more that is put out there,
Yeah.
it's kind of infective.
Totally.
And that's what people say. They just go,
Yeah.
wow, it just feels so great.
Yeah.
You go, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've come to a similar place over the years of just, it's almost like not being too tied to an outcome of like, if it's, even if the world was to be completely destroyed in 5 years, I'm not going to stop. I'm still going to do it, you
That's
know,
right.
like, because like you said, it's from that love, a place that, you know, no matter what, as long as there's still some nature here, I'm going to be out there and doing what I can.
Loving.
Yeah, because, rather than going, I'll only do this, because I think a lot of people, you can get very kind of burnt out when you're trying to save the world, and which is a great thing to try and do, but there's so many variables out of that feel out of our control, and you can't control the whole world. You can kind of do your little bit, and
That's right.
there's that the famous butterfly effect where even little things that you do can sometimes ripple out and just have effects beyond we even imagine. So,
and that's also really important. While here, I know that whatever I do in this small patch, even if it's 10 by 10 meters, we are having a positive effect here in this particular place.
Yeah.
And someone might see that.
Yeah.
And the flow-on effects are significant.
Yeah.
And so holding all of that, I think, is so important.
Yeah.
And while, let's say I found a duck down at the creek which was looking really sick, and I call the EPA to tell them because there's something in the water that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
They say on a sort of scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? And I go, well, compared to ExxonMobil, let's say, not so bad.
Yeah.
But for the duck and everything else, it's 10.
It's not good.
It's all about context and what is within our capacity.
Yes.
And it's all part of a whole.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Definitely. Yeah, and you would have noticed too this this kind of amazing thing that happens when you do focus on a patch of bush where it starts to respond. You start to see things happen, and to me it ties into what I've learnt about quantum mechanics and the observer effect. And when we actually step into a system, as my mentor Doug Frew told me, you step in and you change it just from being there and being aware and conscious. And it's amazing. I mean, you've told me crazy stories about animals that just come out communing with you, and this echidna that's following you around all the time, and it does happen.
It does happen.
Yeah.
It is so true, and it is all that energy. I'm a really strong believer in, energy is ever present. There's molecular structures. We're not fixed. We're not solid. We are permeable, porous. The more porous we are, the more
we're mostly empty space.
Exactly. Well, energized space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so it's in that spaciousness and that porosity that we shape ourselves.
Totally. Yeah.
And so animals sense that. That is how they have survived and interact, and that knowing that they bring.
Yeah.
And how can we be in relation with that? And how do we sense it? So, I get a total thrill when I'm walking in the bush and I'll turn to the side.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything, but I sense that there's an animal looking at me.
Yeah.
And I go, that's so great.
Yeah.
And how can we nurture that and bring that forward in ourselves? Because that is the learning,
Totally.
That is that really deep, intimate space.
Definitely.
Of what it means to be human with all our senses rich and capable.
Yeah.
And they're often dampened down. And partly because the more alive we are, the more painful it is as well.
Totally.
But I say I would rather the pain if it means I'm deeply alive.
Yes. Yeah.
And I go,
Yeah.
feel it all.
Yeah.
And and the animals respond.
Yes.
And the place responds. It's like the greenness comes, and things stand stronger, and love is felt.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a total joy.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
You can hear the king parrot flying over. It's a green.
Yeah, that's right. And it is a wonderful thing to know that an animal has come to see you.
Yeah.
And, whether it's an echidna or a dingo or an eagle or a wren or whatever it might be, that it is coming to acknowledge and greet and be curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And some people it might sound kind of crazy, but I think that's a beautiful thing about having pets is most people have experienced that with, if you've got a dog or a cat, that kind of communication that happens.
Yeah.
You can't talk the same language, but there is this really strong communication,
true.
So and that happens. The more we're in nature, the more that happens with all our wildlife. And,
that's right. Yeah. And there's a beautiful little glider that comes down on a particular acacia at home, and it will come down the tree when I'm there and sort of gaze at me. And it'll eat, chew away at the bark and look. And it's that incredible timelessness, everything drops away.
Wow.
And in that presence, it's precious. And that is feeding, that just is such a nourishing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I know that we've got you've actually got a working bee coming
up
very soon.
How
long we've got? Have we got?
We've got another 10, 15
Oh,
minutes.
excellent. Okay. Yeah. So a couple more questions. I know for myself, I'm very passionate about homeschooling my kids, and we spend a lot of time in nature. Like, to me, just the more time I have with them outdoors, like having more outdoor curriculum, and the kids teach me so much, and they learn so much just from being in nature. Like, sometimes I don't actually have to do much. I just hold the space of taking them out in nature, and and they're exploring, and they're just learning from the bush. And I know you've done so much with kids. You've done amazing workshops over the years you shared with me. So I'd love to hear a bit about what you think about the role, how important it is for kids to be in nature, and your thoughts on that.
I think it's incredibly important and is a foundation of mental and physical health as a basic element. And that capable body of sensing and balancing and receiving and giving and tenderness and attention to detail and knowing risk. I think there's a tendency to be overprotective, which is understandable because we love children and they're beautiful, but they need to experience. I mean, I think about what I did as a kid, and I think, sorry, Mum and Dad, a little bit crazy, but I learn, and what measures to bring, and that you are capable as a human being to venture out and to explore and to learn and to push boundaries of learning.
Totally.
And so I think the more time that we, whether you're a child in terms of, age, youth, or old, or however, whatever your age, the more time you can spend in the bush, touching the ground and being is so important, and hearing the sound of water and seeing the night sky. And I think, that night sky is something that we do not think about enough. And just last night I was looking at the stars thinking, gosh, even in the time, 30 years, how different the night sky is, how much of the Milky Way we have lost to our view, and what that means for our imagining, for our sensing, for the sort of vastness and place in big galaxy space. And how precious it is. And, do we really need to illuminate everything? Do we really need to highlight all this human construct at such a cost? And so the more time we spend in natural places, the more aware we are of what we lose and of what we could nurture and the spaces that we could prioritize. Because, it's all a question of what kind of world do we want to live in?
Totally,
And I think about the complexity that we can learn from the bush and everything else, and I go, this is the place to be.
And it doesn't take much, does it? Like, even having kids out, if you live in the city even, and you have half an hour after school, or anything like that makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Huge difference. And in a front nature strip, plant
exactly.
it out with indigenous plants, and the insects will come. And that's the great thing. You don't even need to do a huge amount. Plant it and they shall come. And what a beautiful thing to transform a space.
Totally.
And see that life re-emerging.
Yeah, definitely.
And kids love it.
Yeah, they do. And it's so fun to, interact with kids when they're in that space
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
Yeah.
And, a lot of kids that I've worked with have grown up in very urban situations and initially might be scared,
Yes.
might be really reluctant, might not see.
Yeah.
But, in that time of sitting and looking at shadows, looking at the hairs on grass, looking at ants crawling through systems, and that ego drops away, or that sense of fear drops away.
Yes.
And curiosity is aroused, and intrigue and wonder.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a magical transformation.
It is.
Yeah.
And I know there's studies coming out, for some people it's obvious, but other, we need to study these things, and things like, is it an alarm? We've got not long to go.
Not too long to go.
I'll just go quickly.
Action time.
Things like anxiety and ADHD and, are real conditions, but often, kids spending a long time in the classroom and maybe with other kids who've all got similar issues and they're all kind of ping-ponging off each other, whereas if you can kind of get a bit more time out of the classroom, it's making a huge difference in kind of, reducing symptoms of those kind of conditions.
Yes, And I've had a lot of teachers tell me, this particular child can't concentrate for more than half an hour, and, there's compartmentalization that goes on, and judgment in all kinds of ways. And then as soon as a different sort of emphasis is brought in, that child is present for the whole day.
It's incredible.
And is immersed and participating and being in self and interacting. And it's that kind of, how can we nurture that more broadly and in a big institutionalized thing such as school. And, rather than synthetic grass, how do we enable natural spaces?
That's right.
And be less fearful?
Yes. Beautiful. Last question before we head to the working bee. So I think it's often important to really have big visions and not be always bound by what's possible or not, because we often think, I'd like to do this, but this thing wouldn't work and this isn't possible and there can be a million hurdles. But if sometimes it's good just to, think, well, what would be my ideal, So my question is, if I gave you a magic wand, I'm giving it to you now, and you could, in 5 years, you see this, how would you see kind of Nillumbik, Yarra region, what would be your kind of, a bit of a, what was your vision in 5 years if what this country could look like? What's your,
Well, and that's how I work, I guess I go biggest imaginings, biggest possibilities, no restrictions, because that's where flow can occur. I see that the community is engaged and in love with place and with nurturing and looking after country, that the waterways are clean, rubbish is vastly reduced, consumption is vastly reduced, animals have returned in abundance and diversity, and there is vigour, zest, vitality in people and country, because there is intimate connection.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that. So good. All right, well, we can look back on this video in 5 years and we'll know it's because of your, this vision that it all happened.
And everybody else's.
And everyone else's.
Yeah.